All right, let me
All
make
right, so we
sure.
are now gonna go back 30 years in time. We're gonna go to 1993, and we're gonna list our top 5 albums of 1993. So these are um, 5 albums that are turning or already turned 30 years old in 2023.
Where did the
And
time go?
absolutely, I don't know exactly, and it's crazy. A lot of all these albums are already considered classic albums. Um, but yeah, insanely great year in music. And in this video, we're gonna list our top 5. And but before that, we're gonna give our list of 5 runners-up records. So records that we really liked from 1993, but didn't quite make it to our top 5s of that year. Because Dave and I were chatting and we were saying that it was just so many good records that came out in 1995.
This was virtually impossible
Yeah,
to come up with a list of, first of all, 5, and then you
5.
said, okay, 5 runners up too. That expands it
Yeah,
to 10, but that
yeah,
doesn't even like scratch the surface, as we were saying. Like,
exactly.
I could do a top 30, 40 easily, and
Yeah,
they would all be classic records. I left
yeah.
off so much off this list. I
Same
know
here.
everyone in the comments is going to be like, but what about
You
this?
missed
But what
out on
about
this. You
that? What
missed
about this? And it's like, I
out.
thought of that, and I
Yeah,
guarantee I did. It
yeah.
just, I couldn't find the space.
Well,
You
that's the
know,
challenge. We have to
it
come
was
out
definitely a
only
challenge.
5 for the top, and then 5 for runners up in any kind of order.
Yeah.
Before getting started, I wanted to say I was only 9 years old in 1993, so I was not aware of any of these records when I was 9. Of course, I was not into music back then, but I do still feel that I grew up with all these records. Because even later on, when I was a teenager, they still play the crap out of all these records that we're gonna mention in this video.
Look, you were
In the
lucky when you were
radio,
9 and 10.
yeah,
The popular music was like Nirvana, Smashing
yeah.
Pumpkins, like all this cool stuff. When I was 10, the popular music was Styx, REO Speedwagon, Chicago, Journey, like a lot of weak shit.
A
Like,
lot of
so
80s
you definitely grew
style
up in a
stuff.
different era. You know, I was
Yeah.
22 in
Uh-huh.
1993. I was
Yeah.
in the prime peak of my music listening.
Yeah.
22 years old. I lived in Seattle at the
Oh,
time,
you
which
were in
was
Seattle. Oh my
exploding,
God.
you
Yeah.
know. So it was like I was I was so immersed in 1993. That's why this
Mm.
thing was so hard,
Yeah.
because that was literally one of the best years of my life. I mean, no doubt 22 is like an amazing year for people just in general, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So Dave, you want to start with your 5 records?
Okay, sure. I will do. These are my 5 runners up. They all could be in the top 5,
Mhm.
no question, but they didn't quite make the cut. So let's
Yeah.
just go in. They're in no order. So, and most of these are on CD because that was
Yeah.
the thing of
That
the
was the
era,
format
right?
of the
So
era, of
now
course.
I do. Oops. Uh, you can right there, Melvin's Houdini.
Elvis. Hmm.
Okay, which I also have here on CD. This is one of my runners up.
Yeah.
Classic album. Um, Yola Tango, Painful.
Hmm.
Okay, amazing album.
That was a
This.
new listen for me when I was preparing for this video,
Oh yeah.
and it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stellar album. I think their next one is actually my favorite, but that's
Mhm.
among it.
That's a great
Liz
album. Yeah.
Phair,
Oh,
Exile
I
in
got it too.
Guyville,
Yeah.
which I did actually have an OG vinyl copy bought in 1993.
Uh-huh.
I sold it in my record purge about 20 years ago for a boatload of money. But I mean, I got a lot for it, but I kind of
Yeah.
wish I still had it. So this is just the remastered CD.
Yeah.
I got Bjork Debut, which I don't actually have on physical. I don't know where the CD went. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Um,
The same thing happened to me. I thought I had that one, and I have a lot of the old Bjork records or albums on CD,
well,
but
Bjork is
I
a
didn't
weird
find it.
one. Not
Mhm.
to, I don't want to talk too much about the runners up, but Bjork would not have been on my list had I made it in like 1993. Like,
Yeah.
I liked Bjork. I knew who she was from the Sugar Cubes.
Yeah.
But when it first came out, I really was kind of indifferent. It was about a year later, I read an
Mhm.
interview with Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips, and he was
Yeah.
asked to name his 10 favorite albums of all time. And Bjork Debut was number 1.
Really?
And I was like, wow, more than the Beatles, more than all this stuff. So it made me kind of check it out again. And it was like,
Mhm.
oh, this album's fucking awesome. So
Yeah, it's a great album.
Bjork is more a revision. Like, I've gotten more into her over time.
Yeah.
And then my last runner up is Matter Rose, Bring It Down, which stellar.
Another
this
new
album.
listen for me, and yeah, I can see why you like it so much. It's
Well,
great.
yeah,
Great
it's
record.
pretty much like
And
my textbook
yeah,
definition sound.
very 90s as well. All right, I'll list my 5 runners up. First of all, can't go wrong with the Cranberries.
Nope.
And this one's called Everybody Else Is Doing It, so why can't we? Love Dolores's voice, and this is their first record too. It's fantastic. I also got, of course, I had to include Nirvana.
Oh yeah,
Utero, great record. Didn't quite make it to my top 5. But
that's another one that I had the OG that I sold in my
really?
Purge. I had it on
You
clear vinyl, and I
to
know
pick up the 30th anniversary. Then I was thinking
well,
about that
I
one
know
too.
it was the original
Yeah,
because I purchased it 2 seconds after Kurt Cobain bought his own.
I think I remember that story that
I
you.
was standing in line right behind him. So
Yeah.
if he had a first pressing, then so did I. I know that.
Then Frank Black,
Ah,
Title.
awesome.
Awesome record. Pretty much could have been the later or the next Pixies record from the original lineup. And then
And he had Joey Santiago, so it's
it
like
had
half
Joey
the
Santiago in
Pixies.
it too. Oh, you also have
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yep.
And of course, I had to go with the classic Siamese Dream from the Smashing Pumpkins.
I only
Great
have the
record.
box version.
Oh,
This
the
one.
new one.
Yeah.
And finally, my last honorable mention, the aforementioned Liz Phair, Exile on Guyville. Had to go with that one too. Pretty much that would Right here. I picked it up at the record store not too long ago, or maybe a few years ago. Love this record.
Mine is still on Matador Records, as you can see, because it was originally released on Matador, and then came out on Merge later when Superchunk got their catalog back. I cannot tell you how much I love this album. You know, I did this is their 3rd album, by the way, and when I did my Superchunk catalog ranking, you know, spoiler alert, this was my number 2, and it was between this and No Pocky for Kitty battling. And I basically said in the video something like, it really doesn't matter, they're both number 1s. I think if I had to redo it, this would be the number 1, because this is just the perfect Superchunk. The right amount of edge from Mac, where he was just really like worked up about something and was just super passionate. And the band was super tight. The first album with John Wurster on the drums, because he didn't play on the previous 2. He joined the band.
He joined the
tour in No Pocky for Kitty, and this was his first one that he played on.
Yeah.
Every song is great. There's not
every
like
song
a
is
bad
a banger
cut on there. Yeah, every song is a banger.
Yeah.
There's not a bad cut. Naming a favorite is useless because they're all favorites, every single one.
That's what I wrote down. I wrote down that this is the most Superchunk album ever, because it just it's kind of like they have their own definition for their sound, right? It's just very fast paced, very anthemic, very catchy, and like you said, like super fun songs.
Well, and they finally hit it. Like, I think the first album had some kind of grungy production, and they were just getting used to, I mean, they were new. I mean, you know, they were young, and the songs were a little bit samey, whatever, but they got into No Pocky for Kitty, slamming. But now the writing and the playing is better, because now they've got John Wurster in there, and they just sound tighter. And man, I mean, yeah. Secret I ain't telling you goodbye.
All right, so I'll move on to my number 5 album of 1993. I had to go with Dinosaur Jr. Where You Been?
Great
and
record.
This one came out on Sire Records. It's the 5th studio album from Dinosaur Jr. And this record, all about the guitars. Crazy guitar playing. Jay Mascis has some of his best riffs in this record. If you're a guitar player, this is the record for you. Like you said about the Superchunk, no bad songs in this one. And what I really like about not only this record, but the overall sound of Dino Jr. is that great mix that they have of the crazy, almost metal guitars, great guitar solos. But his voice is also very, very melodic, right? And kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say monotonous, but kind of very level. And I like that mix.
Look, it's a drawback for some people who just can't stand the way he sings. I learned to love it early on, and it's like once you kind of fall into the vibe of getting what he does, you never think about it again.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because when this record came out, I remember when this record, well, maybe not when it came out, but maybe a few years after, when they were playing some of the songs on MTV, I didn't like it. I didn't get into the Dinosaur Jr. until very much later, when I started to listen to more and more music. It's something that I really had to warm up on, and especially the voice. But the guitar playing is fantastic in this record.
Yeah, like for me, I love that's one of the final Dinosaur records of their first run.
Yeah,
that I was really into. I still like that one, but as they kept going and as the lineup shed, and even by the final album in like 97 or so, or the final album of the original run, he had ditched Murph on drums and had a new drummer, and the sound had become so different. And I started feeling like the albums were an excuse, the songs were an excuse for a guitar solo. It was like, okay, I need to write some song around this killer solo, so like I better come up with some words. And it just seemed like he was less and less into the song part of it and more about
the guitar playing.
Catch me in the studio and like, look at how listen how awesome my guitar sounds. But when they came back in like 05 or 07 or whatever it was, and they had Lou back, and they got the catchiness back. It was like Jay realized it's not just about the guitar solo. You have to have a good basics of the song, and all of their comeback albums have been great.
All right, I'll move on to my number 4 pick of 1993. Let's go with some punk rock and Bikini Kill. And this one's called Oh You Also Got It. Nice.
This is an OG too. This is an OG bought in 1993.
So, I didn't buy it, of course, in the 90s. I got it at the record store. But from what I could find was that it's either an original press or an early repress. I couldn't really tell. And it is on Kill Rock Stars. A crazy album.
Brutal.
Fast-paced. A very short record as well. I think it runs less than half an hour long.
Oh, definitely does.
Yeah. And this is the debut studio album from Bikini Kill, and they're originally from Olympia, Washington. The Pacific Northwest was the place to be in the 90s, especially if you were into grunge and punk.
Oh, I was there.
And you were there, yeah. And what I like about this record is, of course, the performance of Kathleen Hanna in this album. You can hear her screaming. And you can almost feel the way that she was performing these songs at the studio when you listen to this record. Because she screams, it almost feels like she's lying on the floor at some point with a microphone. I'm not sure exactly how it went through, but it is that performance. So you can feel her emotion coming out in all of the songs.
Visceral. It's visceral. You feel it when you listen to it. The playing is intense. It feels like it's all in the red. Like it's just so loud that when you're listening to it, it's almost like distorted. It's so loud that they were playing. And I mean, Rebel Girl is on there, and that's one of their best known songs. I kind of like the single version a little bit better, but it's still a great version. That was the introduction of that song, and that is one of their definitive songs. Great record. I saw Bikini Kill once back in the 90s.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I to be totally honest, I didn't like it because some of the stuff that Kathleen Hanna said from stage, which were sort of offensive to me, but I still like the show. And there was like 5 bands, and it's like Fits of Depression and some other bands were on there, other Kill Rockstar bands. And it was a long day. 5 bands in one show is just too much. You know what I mean? Like that. I got there super early. So.
And they were the closer.
And they were the closer. And I think and they only played 25 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, that they were just a burst of energy, and then they left. And they did she did walk on and say all men have to stand at the back, girls come to the front. I was okay with that. No big deal. I was going to stand in the back anyways, but that was her first thing, was like, when you're that far ahead of the curve, like now the stuff she was saying, and doesn't seem so extreme 30 years later. It just seems like, well, right. That's of course.
Yeah.
But back then,
back in
it definitely did seem very different and very extreme. And, and she was trying to shock you.
Licks, boy, on your backside. Licks, boy, on your backside. Listen to the fate of Shaheed, let's it collide. Tip the earthly body, heavens on my side.
Number 4, Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders. Now, there were more than just 3, but I had 3 major hip hop albums on my list.
Oh, really?
That I had to take out. Like, one was Wu-Tang Clan, Enter the 36 Chambers. 2 was Snoop Doggy Dogg, Doggy Style, which is still killer. And then this one. And actually, De La Soul, I think, had an album in '93, but their stuff was gone for such a long time. I didn't think about it. But this album is so amazing. I mean, I love the last one a lot too. The one that came out right before this, the year before, or 91, I think.
That's their biggest, the bigger one, I think.
Right. And then this one was sort of the follow-up, and then to me sort of signaled the end of Tribe Called Quest, because after this they took 3 or 4 years to come up with the next album, and it wasn't as good, and then they broke up, and then they did get back together a few years ago, but I didn't really care for the reunion album that much, because one of the other rappers, Phife Dawg, had died halfway through the recording. So he's not featured on it, and I like his voice as a counter to Q-Tip. I mean, significant in the use of jazz samples on records, because, and they even talk about, I don't know if it's this one or on the other, where he talks about Ron Carter on the bass, and it's a sample of Ron Carter, who's a classic jazz guy from the 60s. And they shout him out. They're like, Ron Carter on the bass, and then you hear this little bass part. They were very important.
And that's what I like about this kind of like old school hip hop records, is when they talk about each other, like about their own band members.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, this guy, and you're helping us out. And I don't know, I just like that in those records.
I think it's great. And I mean, and I love, I like I said, Q-Tip, great.
Q-Tip.
But Phife Dawg is the guy who always delivers the funniest lines.
Yeah.
He has the craziest commentary on stuff. And, Phife this, Phife that. Where are you going? I mean, I could start reciting his parts where, and he's like, he's like, fuck it, my name's not Phife, I'm Malik, like the girls calling him Phife and everything. And he's like, my name's not Phife.
This was the first listen to me when I was preparing for this video.
Oh, yeah.
And I was glad that you included at least one hip hop record in your list, because I didn't want it to be all about alternative rock or punk records in the 90s. But this has also been my hip hop year. This year I really got into listening to more hip hop, especially the older stuff, right? Like the more.
Well, I have a pretty decent hip hop collection up to about 1996. That's sort of the cutoff for me. Like, I do have some rap after that, but for the most part, I have a lot of 80s and a lot of 90s up to about 96 or so. The last really like stellar hip hop album from that era was probably Dr. Octagon, Dr. Octagonacologist, or whatever it was called.
It's a great record.
And then I started like losing interest in a lot of rap after that, like exceptions, of course, like Atmosphere and a few others. But for the most part, I just, but when I'm talking about the early 90s, I have to include it. My 3 is the Flaming Lips, Transmissions from the Satellite Heart. And this was at the time considered their big album, right?
Oh, really?
Because it was kind of their breakthrough, because it had She Don't Use Jelly was a hit, considered a novelty hit, because the Flaming Lips were so weird. And even in a time of increased tolerance for weirdness of the early 90s, the Flaming Lips even seemed a little bit too weird for the world. And when this was a hit, it was just like, what? Like, it's kind of like when Ween had a hit with Push the Little Daisies. You're like, this is a hit song, you know? And same with She Don't Use Jelly. I just thought it was so weird, awesome, you know, but just this is a hit? Like I was shocked. But anyways, this album is just beautiful. I love every song, and
great record.
God, it's so good.
This was a first listen to me as a whole album, because of course I've heard of the hits here, and Turn It On and She Don't Use Jelly, but as a whole album, it was my first listen. This is the kind of record that really gets you from the very first track, because I believe it has one of the best opening tracks ever.
Yeah, Turn It On is awesome.
Super catchy, super
By the way,
fun.
that was the first and third single from the album. Like, they released it first, it didn't do much. Then they did She Don't Use Jelly, and then after She Don't Use Jelly, they did Turn It On again. They put it out a second time.
Might as well, third time's the charm.
It worked better the second time. I mean, you know, God, yeah.
But yeah, I love that record. It's pretty cool. I also like the song Pilot Can and
Pilot Can, The Queer of God. Awesome.
Also a very crazy track.
And then the closer, Slow Nerve Action, with that really heavy guitar riff, you know, it's just like, I mean, grinding. And I love Be My Head is great. And When You're 22, which I was 22 at the time when this record came out.
The record was for you.
For me, I felt like it was practically written for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great stuff. And you know, and then as the Flaming Lips, they got popular at this point. As what happens with every band, you get these old heads who liked them before, who were like, oh, they sold out, you know, they sold out. And I remember them doing tours with like Stone Temple Pilots and stuff like that. And people confronting them on it, like, why are you playing with these lame bands like Stone Temple Pilots and Spin Doctors? And he's like, look, it's not a challenge to go and play in front of the same 300-400 people over and over and over. It's a challenge as a band to get in front of 10,000 people who don't know you, and to try to warm them up to what you're doing. And I was like, that's a fucking healthy attitude, because not a lot of bands want to do that. So they did this, and then they came up with the next album, Clouds Taste Metallic, which is amazing, but it didn't sell for shit. And it looked like the Lips were going to be over. They took a few years off. They did that boombox experiment thing with the Zaireeka, which was 4 CDs, and you had to play them all at the same time. Which is
really? I didn't know about this.
Impossible to do. They had listening parties around the country where they would play the 4 CDs all at once, because it's a piece where you have to hear them all. I mean, it's impossible to do. It's bullshit. It's stupid. But anyways, and then they came out with Soft Bulletin after they'd been gone for 4 or 5 years with this totally new sound, with this symphonic pop thing, and it caught on, and people were like, I love this, you know. And a lot of people don't even remember when they used to be a guitar band.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, I saw Flaming Lips a few months ago, and Wayne is just the singer. He doesn't pick up a guitar.
No.
You know, he probably hasn't played guitar in 20 years or more, you know.
He can't fit a guitar in his balloon.
No, there's no room. The wireless effects doesn't work when he's inside that plastic or something.
Yeah. All right, my number 3 of 1993 is Screeching Weasel, Anthem for a New Tomorrow, and it came out on Lookout Records. I do not own a copy of this one. These ones are kind of hard to find, unless you picked them up back in the 90s.
Well, I didn't know this record, and when I went on Apple to listen to it, they only had the 30th anniversary remix remaster. So I don't know. I never heard the original, I guess, because I only heard this.
I think it's pretty almost the same.
Okay.
It's the same thing in Spotify.
It didn't seem like it'd be a record that would be radically different with a new mix. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's probably going to be pretty similar.
I think it's going to be close. And originally came out in Lookout Records, and of course, Lookout Records doesn't exist anymore, so those CDs are pretty hard to find. But I think they moved the rights to Asian Man Records, I think.
Okay.
Which I think are a little bit still hard to find.
Good label, yeah.
So we were talking about before that the 90s were of course, the time for alternative rock, or the time for hip hop. But it wasn't quite the time for pop punk. You know, it was after that year. It was in '94 really when those big records exploded. You had Green Day and Rancid and NoFX and Bad Religion and the
It was still big on the underground, because I remember when I was in Wisconsin, 91, 92, before I moved to Seattle, I had a lot of friends who were listening to a lot of that Lookout Records stuff.
Yeah.
Mr. T Experience and
a lot of the Lookout scene bands.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. And those bands would come through and they would play at co-ops. Yeah. And they would play at VFW halls and stuff like that, like punk rock shows for like $3.
So it wasn't quite the time for mainstream pop punk, but there were a lot of, like you said, a lot of really great records that were released by pop punk bands, and Screeching Weasel was definitely one of the best ones to do it back in the day. So you had a lot of great records from them, a lot of great records from Bad Religion, even NoFX had a few records then too. But in my opinion, Screeching Weasel was one of the best ones to do it, and they kind of solidified that sound, you know, like the Ramones guitars with a very melodic and nasally snarl and voice, which I really liked. You know, I'm a pop punk guy, so I can see that it can be a little bit of a deal breaker for other people that are maybe not that much into that sound, but I love it. Like I said before, very melodic. A lot of the songs are, of course, about some of them are love songs, some of them are just fun songs. He has a great track in here called Peter Brady, which is about the Brady Bunch. And he has a great cameo there with Fat Mike of NoFX, adding his now trademarked snarly voice into that song, which is awesome.
Is Screeching Weasel basically Ben Weasel and then whoever he wants to have play with them? Like there's no real lineup, right?
I think back then they were more of a band with a classic lineup. I think this record was with the classic lineup. Okay. But then after this, it was kind of like that Jay Mascis thing where he was
he just whoever he wants to have. Thing.
Yeah. But just a fun record. This is a fun summer album, a daytime record, you know. If you grew up in the 90s and if you listen to any pop punk now, all of those bands, or a lot of those bands, were influenced in Screeching Weasel's music, so I had to include them in my list. I'm just looking for the divine hammer. All right, let's move on to my number 2 album of 1993. I'll show you this one first.
All right,
CD from the 90s. The Breeders.
That's the one I have. I have the OG record. CD from back in the day.
Second studio album from the band from Dayton, Ohio. I also have this one that I just got in the mail.
Is that the 30th anniversary one?
Oh, yeah, this is the 30th anniversary of Last Flash. I picked up the one with the alternative cover. I have not opened this one. I haven't got a chance to listen to it yet.
I was just about to ask you what does it sound like, so I guess like you don't know yet, but
I think it's on streaming as well, but I haven't listened to it yet either. But it has the full record remastered. I think they did it on 45 RPM too. And it has a couple of extra tracks that were not included in the original, which has a song with Jay Mascis, the aforementioned
Divine Mascis. I've been playing it on my show.
Mascis. Oh yeah. I haven't listened to it yet, actually.
It's cool.
I hear good things.
Jay's on guitar and vocals on it. He does the entire vocal.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah, which
that's surprising.
Divine Hammer, and I say this every time I play the song on the radio, is the greatest sexual metaphor in the history of rock. Okay, which has a history of great sexual metaphors going all the way back to the 50s.
To the 60s.
You know, and you know, when it used to be, you know, I'm gonna churn that butter. Okay, he's not really talking about churning butter. He's talking about something. Okay, so
very subtle. Yeah,
there's a long history of sexual metaphor. Yeah. I think Divine Hammer, as the metaphor for getting fucked good, is like amazing. And you throw the word divine in there, so it throws people off, and they don't know what it's really about. It's like, God, this is an awesome song on every level. Kim, God, I love Kim Deal.
And that's one of the things that I love about the Breeders and about this record in particular, is just the creativity that they include in this record, including the big hit, you know, Cannonball. The beginning of that track is just incredibly creative to me, because they're using like a megaphone, and they're using these effects, and they're using things that are there that are not musical instruments to do the intro to their biggest hit. And when they play it live, even nowadays, they do the whole thing.
Yeah,
with the banging of the side of the drums and
saw them last summer.
That.
They were great.
Yeah, they're awesome. So just incredibly creative, incredibly catchy. I wrote down here that this is the kind of record that really takes you on a trip, because the songs are a little bit different. You know, it has a lot of highs and lows, Some songs are a little bit faster, some songs are a little slower, and it has one of the greatest things that I love about records as a whole, which it includes kind of like an intermission, which is a song that they put in the middle of the record that is just instrumental. The song called Flipside. It's kind of like a surf rock type of track. And I love it when bands do that because it makes the record a little bit more memorable. You can kind of remember which songs are in side A and which songs are in side B a little bit more. I don't know. It's just a super fun record to play.
Yeah, I love it. I love every song on here. I was already a major Breeders fan by this point. And in fact, I feel like by 1993, the Pixies had broken up. Trompe le Monde was out and they had done the Pixies broke up. And now it was Frank Black versus the Breeders, and people were like,
there was a lot of competition,
whatever.
Too, right?
There was a little competition. And the Breeders, I mean, this album went double platinum.
Yeah,
that's bigger than any Pixies record by far, bigger than any Frank Black.
Outsold anything that the Pixies
from a commercial perspective, Kim won that contest, right? Yep, and this is a fantastic album. I will say I like the song slightly better, but I mean, I love the production on it. It wasn't too much at all. It was a big sound without being excessive. Like it was just the right amount of production. And whether it was the idea was just to fill up the sound or to try to get on the radio or whatever, who cares? Yeah. It sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. If you get a chance to see them still now, because they're still touring, and I think they're going to be opening for Olivia Rodrigo in the next few years. And the next,
Did you see there's a TikTok of Ben Lee who has a TikTok channel, and he shows this thing of Olivia Rodrigo and the Breeders, and he goes, the Breeders opening up for Olivia Rodrigo's. He goes, respect.
Right on.
Okay, my number 2,
Swerve
Driver, Mezcal Head. Awesome.
I found it at the record store a few months ago.
This album is so great. Now, commonly referred to as a shoegaze record and considered a shoegaze classic. However, I think if you're a shoegaze purist, you might sort of disagree with it because it is a lot more rock sounding.
Yeah,
they sound like a shoegaze band, but also mixed in with Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. because Adam Franklin has said on multiple times that he's just as influenced by Dinosaur Jr. and Sonic Youth as he was by any of the early British shoegaze stuff. And they always had a more American sound and more distorted guitar rock sound. But this song is masterful. This album is masterful. I like every song. I like Blowin' Cool. Of course, Duel, the song Duel is their best song. That's the second song on side 1. That's their best song in their entire catalog, start to finish, is the song Duel. That's just amazing. Harry and Maggie is great. Last Train to Satansville. A Change Is Gonna Come, which was an early song talking about calling out racism in the music world. And
really?
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Girl on a Motorbike is great. I mean, every song on here.
I wrote down all of those. I wrote down that they have 3 songs that go back to back in the record in side A. Last Train to Satanville, Harry and Maggie, and A Change Is Gonna Come. When I was listening to this record or re-listening to this record for this video, I was like, how can this record get any better? And then the next track comes in and it's just better than the other one. It's like, this record is absolutely insane. It has Last Train to Satanville. I think it could have been easily a hit, but I think it's a single.
It was a single. Yeah.
But I think that the ending is maybe too long. It has like jammy kind of end to the track. So maybe it wasn't very radio friendly for that. But the guitars are incredible in this. And I think I see what you're saying about them being shoegaze or not, because I think they have a little bit more of your traditional guitar picking in the record than your standard shoegaze bands. Which, like you said, I think
they're just more aggressive on the guitar, whereas shoegaze is a lot more atmospheric and feeding back. And they do a lot of feedback, but I mean, it's just different. It's hard to articulate how it's different, but
you have to listen to the record to really understand.
You put up this next to, say, Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, considered the signature shoegaze record of all time.
Yeah.
And they don't really sound that similar. No. I saw them a few years ago in like 2019. They did a tour with the band Failure.
Yeah. And that's the tour that I saw.
They were great. They were great on that.
They're awesome.
Better crowd too. So
yeah, but this record is phenomenal. Great nighttime record. It's a great record to play at night. Just put it in the turntable in your stereo, whatever, and grab a glass of beer or something. Just enjoy the sounds, because this is the kind of record that will take you on a trip at night.
Absolutely. You can just zone out and just enjoy it. Just dig the vibe, you know?
Yeah.
My number one is Nirvana In Utero. And mine is the European version, which has gallons of alcohol rubbing. Right. What's it called? Gallons of alcohol flow through the strip.
That's the jam song, right? At the end.
Yeah. Like it's the bonus song that was now it's on all the versions of In Utero. But at the time, this was mine says made in France on the back.
Uh-huh.
Now, I've told my infamous story of I did have the vinyl. I bought it. You know, I stood in line behind Kurt Cobain himself, who bought it on vinyl at the record store. I tapped him on the shoulder. He turned around and I said, "Don't you get a free one of those?" And he said, "My record company never gives me anything." And then he finished paying and then he walked out the door.
That's the answer that you would expect from Kurt Cobain, right?
Nirvana In Utero, at the time, the most anticipated album in the world when that one was
worldwide, for sure,
was coming out, because Nirvana changed the world with Nevermind and everything was turned all topsy-turvy and whatever. And this was the follow-up.
Yeah.
And for people
all eyes on Nirvana.
Right. And for people that don't remember, there was a ton of controversy and stuff about the album, because apparently the word was that when Nirvana delivered the album to Geffen Records, they were like, they're like, "We want you to go back and fix it. We want it remixed. We want it re-recorded. We want it something." And Nirvana was like, "No." You know, they did concede to some changes. They did remix Heart-Shaped Box.
Right? Yeah.
They remixed Heart-Shaped Box and they remixed All Apologies,
which you can hear the original versions on streaming now, or in the 30th anniversary version, and they don't sound that different.
All Apologies sounds virtually the same. The difference with Heart-Shaped Box is there was this weird kind of guitar, like skronking or whatever, that they took out. But besides that, it's pretty similar too. And Nirvana delivered the most brutal, unapologetic, amazing, in-your-face record, the record that they needed to make, that is, in my opinion, my favorite of the three.
It is my favorite Nirvana album too. And I also like that it is, like you said, a response. It is my favorite Nirvana record, and it's a direct response of what Nevermind was, right? And Nevermind was a little bit more polished, a little bit more accessible to a lot of people. And this one, they went all out, you know, like, we are going to play hard. We're going to play abrasive guitars. We're going to scream. Kind of similar to what we were saying before about Bikini Kill. You know, they wanted to put a performance.
Yeah, some of these vocals were in the red. He was just screaming. And, you know, when you hear the producers like Steve Albini and Butch Vig and the guy who did Bleach, I'm blanking on his name right now, but when you hear them talk about it, like, Kurt had a very controlled voice. He could just do that. Like, he could sing perfectly melodically, and then they ask him to do it again. He could do it again, and it was exactly the same. Then for another part with the screaming, he could just give these blood-curdling screams. And then, "Oh, you need me to do it again? Okay." And then you do it again. You know what I mean? And then this one to come out, and it doesn't sound like that. It doesn't sound like Nevermind. It is a different animal. Yeah. The lyrics are a lot more direct. And he's so fucking pissed on a lot of these songs.
It's very dark lyrics if you pay attention to a lot of those.
We know what happened to Kurt the next year. Obviously, he was not in a good place mentally. And you can hear that
from those lyrics.
It's very dark.
Some of those lyrics are a little gruesome. They're very dark. There's a few tracks that were left off the record that are even darker as well. Like I Hate Myself and Want to Die, that track.
Which is a great song, and they don't even say the words in it, right? They don't even say the words, I hate myself and want to die. It's like, it's just this catchy song. They threw it on the Beavis and Butthead soundtrack.
Oh, really?
That's where that song went. Yeah, God, there's just, every song is great. And they started playing some of this stuff as early as the beginning of the Nevermind tour. Like when Nevermind blew up and Nirvana got really big, I was so obsessed. I bought every 12-inch, every bootleg. There were so many bootleg 7-inches of Nirvana. All of the songs that eventually became Incesticide, I had on bootleg 7-inch. And every song is great. Radio friendly unit shifter. Gives his perspective on the music industry and the music business. And it's so great. Just the title of it's perfect. And then All Apologies is such a masterful song.
That's one of my favorite Nirvana tracks.
Yeah, it's just so great. Where he's just like, I mean, whatever you're mad about, whatever you're upset about, just hey, sorry, dude. We're
just apologize.
We're just moving on. I mean, it is what it is. And then he had that song "Everyone Is Gay" in the line in the song, which is like in 1993 was not a lyric that you would associate with mainstream. You didn't say stuff like that, but he did.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned All Apologies. I think it's a genius song. And we were talking before about great opening tracks. I think this is the perfect.
Oh, Serve the Servants is awesome.
Track. And that's why I like maybe the American version of the record, because it doesn't have the hidden bonus track, because I think All Apologies is nearly a perfect song, especially at that point at the very end of the record. Just end the record with that kind of mood. Just an awesome track.
They also remixed Penny Royalty. I forgot that. They also did a remix of that, and that was supposed to be the
single, right?
Next single after Heart Shaped Box.
Yeah.
And I've seen promo versions of the single, but then Kurt died, and they were like, okay, done. We're done promoting the album, and they never put it out as a single.
All right, my number one album of 1993, I had to go with the Muffs.
I've only got it on CD, but here it is.
I also had it on CD too. It actually only came out on CD back in the 90s, and it was just recently, maybe like a few years ago, it was pressed on vinyl. I think Drastic Plastic put this one out.
Oh, that's Omaha.
Oh, really?
That's it used to be a record store here in Omaha called Drastic Plastic, and they put out.
It says Omaha,
they did do some reissues of albums. Oh, I didn't know they did that one. Damn.
Yeah. But it originally
they don't
came
exist
out
anymore. They went out of business. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
Originally came out on Warner Brothers, so it was one of the first punk bands to come out, or from that era, I guess, from that scene, on a major label. Self-titled, first studio album from the band from Los Angeles. Their debut, in my opinion, it is a perfect record.
Signed and produced by Rob Cavallo.
Rob Cavallo, who went on to
did the next Green Day, and I don't know if I'm sure you saw this, but when Kim Shattuck passed away, Billy Joe Armstrong went on Instagram and said that they were listening to the Muffs all the time when they were recording Dookie, and they loved the record. Yeah,
you can clearly see the influence there. It is surprising
when the Muffs first came out, and then Green Day got popular. I said, like, the Muffs sounded like a cross between Green Day and Courtney Love.
Yeah,
because they were two bigger artists at the time, and so I used to merge those two. I was like, if you like both of those, imagine them together. And that's kind of what it was like. I mean, that's rough. I mean,
Kim did have that kind of screamy voice.
Her scream is better, actually. I think her scream is better
for sure. And of course, the music is very funky, rock and roll. Definitely, it's clear to see that influence on other pop punk bands like Green Day that came out with Dookie later, of course.
The only album with the original lineup.
Back with the original lineup. This is the only record that came in as a 4-piece. Then later on, there will be a trio with just Kim, Ronnie, and Roy. So it sounds a little bit different than the records that will come out later. Of course,
one of my biggest regrets about the Muffs was I only saw them one time, and it was on this tour.
It was on that tour.
And with Chris Crass was in the band and Melanie, and I saw them on that tour, and then I never saw them again. And I became a much bigger fan after that, but they just seemed to never play where I was at the time, and never got a chance to see them again.
And later on in the 2000s, they didn't tour that much. I only got a chance to see them. They kind of
took a break for a while, yeah.
Yeah, I only got a chance to see them once, and it was just a single tour that they played in one of the venues here in Atlanta, and it wasn't even a tour.
Oh, really?
But anyways, this record, perfect melodies. This is the just fun songs, very catchy. These are very guitar-driven pop songs. If you pay attention, there you go. There's all the band members
stuff.
Yeah,
and I know it's kind of sexist and gross to be like, oh, Kim was really hot back then, but she was. I mean, she was really good looking. And sure. It's like, I'm a guy. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't notice stuff like that.
She was always wearing those cute dresses too.
She was, and you know what? When my most popular video of my YouTube channel was my Rest in Peace Kim Shattuck.
Oh,
video.
Really?
That's
really. I guess later on the Muffs were more of the positive vibes kind of band. Yeah. All of their songs were about being happy and being in a better place in the world. But this very first record wasn't quite that.
Oh, they weren't there yet.
No. It was a lot of, and that's why I think it's the genius of Kim Shattuck, is that she was able to put in semi-darker lyrics or sad songs on a very upbeat and poppy and catchy tune. Songs like Everywhere I Go, From Your Girl, an incredibly heartbreaking song. Baby Go Round.
Baby Go Round. I was just going to say Baby Go Round.
Big Mouth. These are all fun songs. If you listen to them, if you just play it, you think that this is just a fun rock and roll song, a very pop-oriented, guitar-driven rock song, or guitar-driven song. But if you pay attention to the lyrics, they're kind of sad. They're actually kind of deep and emotional. And I think there's a very.
I think Lucky Guy was the single.
Lucky Guy, the very opening track was the single for that song, and there was also a music video for that track too.
Yeah, it's a pretty good video. I don't remember ever seeing it on MTV. Because they get a lot of play, but I've seen it on YouTube a bunch. And I said this in the video, and a lot of people disagreed with me, that if the Muffs had been called anything else, they might have been a bigger band.
Because names matter sometimes.
People forget how conservative things were, especially radio.
Yeah.
In the early 90s. And I just think a lot of programmers were like, we're not going to play something and have to say the Muffs all the time. Like, even though who cares? Now it just seems so silly. Yeah. But like back then, I really think that was a hindrance.
Yeah.
I mean, to getting them on the radio, because their stuff was so catchy and so great that, why wouldn't it be? There must have been some reason. I think that was part of it, personally.
And a lot of people would say that they could have easily been the next Green Day because they had the same producer, they had the same record label, and their music was kind of similar as well. So they could have.
I mean, they took it in a different direction once they started, going on. I mean, the Muffs, then they didn't really sound as much like it, but compare this one to like Dookie, and there's a lot of similarities.
Absolutely. And then the highlights of the record, like I mentioned before, Big Mouth, super catchy. From Your Girl is just Stupid Jerk. I think it's a cover.
Is it?
Okay, I think it is. I think it's a cover. I can't remember that. I think it's the Angry Samoans. I can't remember exactly. But that's a fun song. From Your Girl, I love the vocal performance in that track. You can hear a lot of emotion from Kim in that one. And every single thing. Great tracks. Yeah, sad story from the Muffs, but at least we have this.
Well, she had a really long career. I mean, look, it's not like the Muffs were cut short after one album or something, or, it's tragic what happened to her. Obviously, it's very sad. But she did get, at least we have a lot of Muffs music to look back on. Whereas someone like when Jessie Darlin from Those Darlings died, she was 27 years old. They only had 3 albums. Right. They only had 3 albums. What's that? Yeah. But she didn't take her own life. She died from cancer. But I mean, it was just so tragic because they didn't get to fulfill their whole thing. I mean, I feel like the Muffs got a lot out of it there, so it's like they were kind of covered to a certain degree. But yeah, I love that. That's a good record. The whole thing's good.
Damn, what a great year in music. I think, like you said before, I think we just scratched the surface with all these 10 records.
We did. There's so many. I mean, records. Girls Against Boys, I forgot. I did, Afghan Wigs, I didn't even think of. Arc Welder Pull. There's a million records I didn't even think of.
There's a Juliana Hatfield record this year.
Juliana Hatfield, Become What You Are, which I considered, and I realized I like Hey Babe and the one after better, so I didn't include it. Yeah, so many guys.